Hello everyone and welcome back. In today's video we've got a couple of things to discuss, including a couple of signings, our last Stanley Cup Final update of the season as the Stanley Cup Final has come to an end, a couple of injury updates, some updates surrounding the head coaching position in New York and the owner position in Ottawa, plus a couple of trade rumors involving the Carolina Hurricanes, Jonathan Toews, and the San Jose Sharks. I'm going to do all that coming up right now. Hello and welcome to another video here at the Intent Hockey Channel. Now before I get into all the latest news, rumors, updates, Stanley Cup Final stuff, all of that, I'm going to kick things off today with a channel update. So as we know, with the Stanley Cup Final just about finished up, the trade rumors, the news, this is now the kickstart of the offseason. So there's going to be a lot more news, rumors, trades, stuff like that that's going to be happening over the next couple of weeks. So given that, I'm going to probably still do my 3 videos a week, but don't be surprised if I do a couple more videos throughout the week over the next couple of weeks. If any of you guys are watching my videos back in February around the trade deadline, I did a couple more videos than my usual too, discussing big trades and some significant rumors and stuff like that. So don't be too surprised if I do a couple more videos in just 3 times a week over the next couple of weeks. As we get into the heat of the offseason over the next couple of weeks, as it sounds like there's going to be a lot of trade rumors and trade news. On top of that, this is a really big channel update for me, but I am going to be going live for the first time on this YouTube channel. I know I have never gone live before, so it'll be my first time. But on June 28th at 4 o'clock, I'll be going live to give you my live opinion on what will happen with the NHL draft. That will also start on June 28th at 4 o'clock. So definitely stay tuned for that. If you want live updates and analysis and my opinion of what happens throughout the draft for those couple of hours. So definitely stay tuned for that and mark in your calendars. I will be going live June 28th at 4 o'clock. So definitely stay tuned for that. But definitely, with the offseason heating up and the trade winds about to blow in, definitely, I'm going to be definitely trying to do at least 3 videos, if not more, throughout the week, depending on how many big trades there are over the next couple of weeks. And I'm going to be going live on June 28th at 4 o'clock. So definitely stay tuned for that. But that's all the channel update I'm going to get to today. Now let's get back to the regular portion of the video. So first, we're going to go off with some signings that have happened recently. There's definitely been a couple of good signings over the past couple of days. We'll start with a couple of depth signings. So first was the Dallas Stars. They signed Alex Petrovic to a 1-year contract extension that will have an average annual value of $775,000. And the deal will begin at the start of this upcoming season. Now for Petrovic, he does have some NHL experience under his belt. He's played in the NHL for the past number of years, has over 260 games of NHL experience. But the past 4 seasons he's been playing solely in the AHL. So he's been more of an AHL depth forward for the teams he's played for over the past couple of years. 2 years ago, he had 5 goals, 19 points in 71 games. He signed a 1-year contract last year with the Dallas Stars. The Stars brought him in, kept him in the minors, and he had probably his best point production in the AHL over the past 4 years, putting up 9 goals and 27 points in 71 games. So the Stars liked him enough to re-sign him. I'm not sure if he'll be able to make the NHL roster because the Stars still have a really deep D-core, and it wouldn't surprise me if they tried to upgrade it. So I find a hard time believing that Petrovic would be able to make the NHL roster, but I would not be surprised if Petrovic was a decent AHL player, and if he can continue to play the way he did last year, one of his better AHL seasons, I could definitely see Petrovic at some point go to the NHL, maybe if the Stars are a little bit banged up. If they need some call-ups, I could definitely see Petrovic being one. So not going to be a guarantee that he makes the NHL, but definitely a really good signing for the Dallas Stars. Next, over with the New York Rangers, they signed winger Anton Blidh to a 2-year contract extension that will have an average annual value of $775,000. And the deal will begin at the start of this upcoming season. Now for Blidh, he's mostly been with Boston over the past couple of years. Definitely was a solid bomb stick forward with the Bruins. Signed last year with the Colorado Avalanche on a 1-year deal. Split time between the Avalanche's NHL and AHL affiliate, and then was traded the line to the Rangers. Spent the rest of the season with the Rangers AHL affiliate, so he didn't do overly bad, but he was still putting up some solid numbers. Last year, only in the NHL for Blidh. He didn't play any AHL games. He definitely did really good with the Bruins at the NHL level, putting up 2 goals and 9 points in 32 games. This year, he played sometimes in the NHL with the Avalanche. He didn't get any points in 14 games. but he still had solid numbers in the AHL. As splitting time between the Colorado Avalanche and the New York Rangers AHL affiliates, he put up 13 goals and 23 points in 59 games, but had 11 points in 17 games with the Rangers affiliate. So Rangers definitely think that he can be a good depth option. Not sure if he'll be able to make the opening night roster, but still, just like Petrovic, a really good depth addition, and if they run into injuries, he's someone who can step in the bottom six role. So a good signing for the Rangers, and someone who can definitely be a good depth forward for them. A couple of entry-level contracts to get to. The New York Islanders have signed 2021 fifth-round pick Liukas to a 3-year entry-level contract that will have an average annual value of $168,000, and the deal will begin at the start of this upcoming season. Now, for Liukas, like I said, fifth-round pick in 2021, so a couple of years ago, was a decent fifth-round pick. He's a left winger who's been playing over in Liga. 2 years ago, he had a solid season, putting up 8 goals and 12 points in 48 games. This year, though, a lot better. In 58 games, he was able to put up 14 goals and 23 points. So he looks solid. So getting his contract extension with the Islanders, really good. I'll expect he'll probably still need 1 more year in Liga, maybe a year or 2 in minors, before he can contend for an NHL spot. But I think in time he could definitely be contending for like a good bottom six role with the Islanders, maybe on the third line. So definitely a good sign for the Islanders to get another good young prospect signed, but still probably going to be a couple years away from challenging for a roster spot. Yanni Nyman, who was one of the 4 second-round picks that Seattle Kraken picked last year in the 2022 draft, signed his 3-year entry-level contract with the AAV of $923,000, and the deal will begin at the start of next year. So definitely very interesting to see. Nyman is a really good winger. He's been playing over in Liga as well over the past couple of years. Had an assist in 10 games a couple of years ago during his draft year in Liga, but then had a solid season this year, putting up 10 goals and 14 points in 29 games, which is a really solid point total for a player playing in Liga. So definitely, I think Nyman in time could definitely be a good middle six forward for the Kraken. Definitely one of the better prospects that the Kraken picked during that draft last year, but probably still going to need 1 or 2 more years in Liga and the minors. Probably still needs a little bit more time to develop, but I think in time he could definitely be a good second, third line winger for the Kraken, and he was definitely a really good take in the second round for the Kraken in this last year's draft. And then finally here with the Chicago Blackhawks, they have re-upped top 6 winger Andreas Athanasiou on a 2-year contract extension that will have an average annual value of $4.25 million, and the deal will begin at the start of this upcoming season. Now for Athanasiou, really, really good player. For Athanasiou, he was one of the guys the Hawks signed last offseason free agency to bring in and then trade away at some point in the season. They brought in Domi and Athanasiou on 1-year, $3 million deals, and they were able to move Domi for a second-round pick. They were not able to move Athanasiou, so they were kept around Athanasiou towards the end of the season, and he actually worked out quite well. After coming off a pretty banged-up year where he only played in 28 games, putting up 11 goals and 17 points 2 years ago with the Kings, last year he was able to hit 20 goals and 40 points in 81 games. And for Athanasiou, that was his best goal total and point total since the 18-19 season when he hit 30 goals and 50 points with the Detroit Red Wings. So definitely, he was a really good piece of the puzzle for the Hawks. Like we said, they most likely will draft Connor Bedard in the draft this year, so most likely they will be getting him. They're going to want to surround him with some good NHL talent. Athanasiou is a good speedy winger who can put up some points if need be. So although I'm not too sure if Athanasiou will play with Bedard, he still could be a good option to possibly play with him. So a good signing there. Like I said, the Hawks also need to get to the cap floor, and signing a guy like Athanasiou to a $4 million contract for the next 2 years is the prime option for them to do so. So a really good signing for the Hawks, in my opinion. Athanasiou is a good top 6 winger who can definitely help and maybe even play with Bedard if the Hawks do trade him in the draft, which I think they will. So definitely one interested to see, but good signing for the Hawks to get Athanasiou a good extension, and hopefully Athanasiou can continue to be a really good force for the Hawks over the next couple of years. Good signings for Nyman in Seattle and Liukas for NYI. I think both Liga forwards in time could definitely be good NHL forwards. And then good depth signings by the Rangers with Bleed and the Stars with Petrovic, because I think both guys could definitely be really good depth players in the organization. While they might not get a ton of NHL opportunity, they could definitely be one of the first call-ups if the teams were to be injured early in the season. So definitely interesting to see, but I like all these signings for all the players and teams that signed them. So really good stuff there. We'll get over to the Stanley Cup playoff update now. So we went into Tuesday's action. Knights were up 3-1 heading back to Vegas, a chance to close out the series and win the Stanley Cup. Panthers looking to send it back to Florida. Now, the Panthers were shorthanded. They were banged up. Matthew Tkachuk was not playing in this game. We'll get more to that in a couple of minutes. But it was a really bad start for the Panthers to lose their heart and soul of their team in Tkachuk for this game. A lot of their players were banged up. So they were definitely playing hurt, and it was an uphill task. They have come back from 3-1 before when they came back earlier in the first round against the Boston Bruins. But this just seemed like a whole different task. So the first 10 minutes of this game were pretty even. Both sides were having really good chances. But then just past the 11-minute mark, Mark Stone was able to take the puck short-handed and put it past Sergei Bobrovsky to open the scoring and give the Golden Knights their first lead of Game 5, putting themselves up 1-0. Then, just under 2 minutes left, off a very mad scramble in front of the net, Nicholas Hague would find the loose puck, put it in, and the Golden Knights were up 2-0 less than 2 minutes after Mark Stone made it 1-0. So, definitely, the Panthers did gain some momentum, but there was no goal scoring, and that's the way we finished the first period. 2-0 Vegas. So then we went to the second period, and that is where 2 minutes and 15 seconds into it, Aaron Ekblad would score to put the Panthers on the board and cut the lead to 2-1. That was a big goal for Florida to cut the deficit to 2-1. But after that, it just seemed like Vegas took it to a whole nother level. Just past the midway point of the second period, Alec Martinez would score a goal, making it 3-1 with his second of the playoffs. Then on this goal here from Riley Smith, that would give the Vegas Golden Knights a 4-1 lead with his fourth of the playoffs. And it just seemed at this point like Vegas had the will and the instinct to win the Stanley Cup at that point, and didn't look like the Florida Panthers had anything left in the tank. And I think if at that point you weren't convinced Vegas was going to win, a couple minutes later, Mark Stone was able to score his second of the game, 10th of the playoffs, to increase the lead to 5-1. And at that point, I think it was pretty much a given Vegas was most likely going to win this game. And then just a couple of minutes later, with just under 2 seconds left in the period, Michael Amadio would score to make it 6-1 Golden Knights. And that's the way the second period ended. That's the way we went to second intermission, 6-1 Vegas. That's the way we went to the third period. In the third, Barbashev would score just past the 8-minute mark to make it 7-1. Just 25 seconds after that, Reinhart would score to make it 7-2. Just past the midway point a couple of minutes later, Sam Bennett would score for the Panthers to make it 7-3, make it somewhat closer. They would pull the goalie, and after a few missed attempts, Mark Stone was able to complete the hat trick, getting his 11th of the playoffs, his third of the game, and giving the Knights an 8-3 lead. And that was the first hat trick in a Stanley Cup clinching game since I think it was like 1920 or 1930 in the NHL. So definitely very interesting, and Mark Stone looked really red hot in this game against the Florida Panthers. That's the way most of it would end. With just over a minute left in the game, Nicholas Waugh would score for the Knights to put them up 9-3. And that's the way the game would end. It was a huge win for the Golden Knights. I think they said that was the most goals by a team in a Stanley Cup clinching game with 9 goals. So the Knights just absolutely wanted to end this series here, wanted to end the series now, and they did it. So Vegas looked fantastic all series long, especially in Vegas. It just looked like Florida was lost in all 3 games on the road in Vegas. So definitely, Vegas looked like the dominant team, and Vegas looked like the team who wanted the cup more. So Vegas wins 9-3, and the Vegas Golden Knights are your 2023 Stanley Cup champions, winning the Stanley Cup in 5 games over the Florida Panthers. So definitely, it was very interesting. Congratulations to the Golden Knights. They had played one heck of a season this year. Western Conference champions in the regular season, Western Conference champions in the playoffs, and now Stanley Cup champions. The first time in franchise history. I know they're a very long 6-year history, but still, in their 6 years, this is now their first Stanley Cup. And I know they've definitely done a lot of good things. I know a lot of their moves were questionable. They didn't really treat their players the best, and they always went after the biggest and best free agents and trade options that they could go, but they've made a Stanley Cup champion, so I don't think we can really question much of their moves now. So definitely, the Golden Knights looked really scary in the Stanley Cup Final. They looked really good, and now, for the first time in their long 6-year franchise history, they are Stanley Cup champions. So there will be no more playoffs. I'll get to the Golden Knights and Panthers off-season previews in my next video, talking about what they should do in the off-season. Florida to get back to the Stanley Cup Final, maybe win next year, and the Golden Knights to keep their Stanley Cup next year, and what they have to do to keep most of that group intact. But definitely, it was a really entertaining Stanley Cup Final, really entertaining playoffs. Definitely, though, the Knights were the way better team in the Stanley Cup Final. So definitely, much deserved, and the Knights, for the first time in franchise history, have won the Stanley Cup. So definitely interesting to see. If I'm correct, they're the 21st team to win the Stanley Cup. So still a couple of teams who haven't won a Stanley Cup. And I hope that at some point some of those teams are able to win their first Stanley Cup in the not too distant future too. So definitely interesting to see. But the Golden Knights have won the Stanley Cup over the Florida Panthers. And the 2023 season is now over. So that's all I'll talk about there. There's a couple of injury updates, mostly with the Florida Panthers following that game. Matthew Tkachuk did miss Game 5 due to injuries. We later found out that he had a broken sternum, which is really hard. It's quite surprising to see that he finished Game 3 and played Game 4 with that injury. So really, really bad for him. Hopefully he can recover in time for next year, but it's quite possible he could miss the start of next season. Aaron Ekblad played this year through a broken foot, had a dislocated shoulder, and had an oblique tear. So there was a lot of things that Aaron Ekblad had wrong with him, a lot of injuries for Aaron Ekblad. So to see him play through all of that, even score in the last game of the Stanley Cup Final, was quite amazing. Quite surprising that he was able to do that. And I think Ekblad is a guy who could also miss the start of the season next year. Montour is going to require shoulder surgery. He's going to be out for the next 3 months. So he's probably going to be out until some point training camp, maybe the start of the season. So definitely, once again, Montour had shoulder injury. So to see him play through that is quite amazing. So the Panthers definitely played really banged up, and you can see why they were so out of it towards the end of the Stanley Cup Final. So definitely interesting, but it sounds like those three Panthers could miss the start of the season next year due to injuries. And then also with a non-playoff team in the Vancouver Canucks, Ethan Bear has a shoulder injury as well. He's going to be out for about the next 4 months, which will put him out until probably around the start of the new NHL season. So not great news for the Canucks. Hopefully you can recover a little bit ahead of time, but still, it sounds like Bear might miss the next little while. So that's definitely an interesting injury note, but still, it sounds like the Canucks defenseman will probably miss a significant amount of time. So definitely interesting to see, but a lot of Panthers and one Canuck are injured for the next few months. So definitely interesting to see when they get back and if they can get back before the season starts. But that's all the injury updates we're going to get to today. Then a couple of updates with the Rangers and the Senators. As we talked about on Tuesday, if there were any updates, I would get to it here. And there was a couple of updates. So it was official later on Tuesday after I recorded my video that Peter Laviolette was going to be named the new head coach of the New York Rangers. So I don't think this comes as much of a surprise. Ever since the Rangers fired Jared Gallant after their first round exit, there was a lot of people speculating that Laviolette was one of the front runners for the Rangers job, and he winds up getting it. So he has a ton of coaching experience under his belt. From 2001 to 2003, he was the coach of the Hurricanes. From 2003 to 2008, he was the coach of. From 2009 to 2013, he was coach of the Philly Flyers. From 2013 to 2020, he was the coach of the Nashville Predators, and his latest coaching stint, from 2020 to 2023, he was coach of the Washington Capitals and was recently let go about a month and a half ago from the Washington Capitals. So definitely, he's going to get another opportunity to coach. He definitely likes to coach Metro teams, Carolina, Philadelphia, New York Washington. This is going to be his 5th time coaching a Metro team. So quite interesting to see, but I definitely think Laviolette could be a good coach with the Rangers. I think that maybe he can help get that team to next level, as after making the conference final 2 years ago against the Bolts, they were ousted in the first round this year against the Devils. So hopefully Laviolette can provide that new voice that the Rangers need to try and make it past the first round this upcoming season, and make the playoffs, make it past the first round this year. So I definitely think that Laviolette was the right hire. There was a lot of talk about John Hines possibly being in the mix too, but it seems like Laviolette was always the Rangers' choice. So definitely going to be interesting to see, but I think Laviolette was the right choice for New York Rangers. And then for the Ottawa Senators, they now have the new owner, as Michael Andlauer, who was part of the ownership group in Montreal, is now the new owner of the Ottawa Senators. So there still has to be some other things that get done before it's really official. like the NHL still has to approve it, and Michael Andlauer has to get rid of his share of the Montreal Canadiens, given the fact he's now the owner of the Senators. But we do know now that the owner of the Ottawa Senators will be Michael Andlauer. So definitely, there was a lot of talk throughout the bidding process and stuff like that this would be a $1 billion offer. It wound up being a $950 million bid. So it was not $1 billion, which is what some people thought, but still, it was quite a bit of money to buy the Ottawa Senators. So definitely going to be interesting to see. But now the owner isn't in place, even though they still need to do some other things before it's all finalized and done. They do have their new owner, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens now they have the new owner in place. Does Pierre Dorion remain the GM? Does DJ Smith remain the coach? Those are two situations to be watching out for over the next couple of days. Does the Ottawa Senators, maybe this impact the Alex DeBrincat situation? Does this impact some of the other situations? It's going to be interesting to see. But now we know for a fact that the Ottawa Senators will have Michael Andlauer be the new owner of the Ottawa Senators. And he is able to buy the team for less than $1 billion at $950 million. So I don't think it's too surprising that Andlauer was the guy who wound up buying the Senators. And even though there was a lot of talk about $1 billion, I think getting the Senators for $950 million is still quite a bit of money and quite a good job for the NHL to get for the Ottawa Senators. So definitely going to be interesting to see, but we now know that Andlauer is going to be the owner of the Ottawa Senators, and I can't wait to see what sort of trickle-down effect this has with some like the coaching position, GM position, and what happens with some of the players. So definitely interesting to see, but now we know that the Ottawa Senators owner situation is done, and they can start focusing more on the off-season. So that's going to be interesting to see. One quick note before I get to the trade updates. With the NHL season now done, it sounds like there's going to be a lot more off-season talk over the next little while. That's why I'm going to be doing possibly more than 3 videos a week over the next couple weeks. Why I'm going to be doing a live video on June 28th at 4 o'clock. But it does sound like the first big date will happen later tonight or Friday morning. It's going to be the first buyout period. That always happens either June 15th or 2 days after the Stanley Cup was awarded. It's been 2 days. It was June 15th. So it sounds like later tonight we'll have the first buyout period of the NHL season. So teams will be able to have the chance to buy out some contracts. So we might start getting a little bit more activity over the next little while. But usually I like to think that with about 2 weeks to go before the draft, which is where we are right now, the trade talk starts to pick up. We start to get a lot more rumors, and I expect that to happen in the not too distant future. So definitely something to keep our eye on, but I expect it to be a lot more busier. But expect later tonight to have the first opening of the buyout period for the NHL, and it's to run through all the way to June 30th. So definitely interesting to see. Could we see a team get a buyout? I think it's quite possible. There could be a couple of teams who look to buy out a contract, but definitely very interesting to see. And if there is anything like that, we'll talk about it on Saturday. So that's all the updates we want to get to today. And next we go over to the trade rumor part of the video. So just a couple quick trade rumors here. First was the Carolina Hurricanes. And I saw a report about a week ago talking about the Carolina Hurricanes. And I'm not sure if this is true or not, but it sounded like we know that the Carolina Hurricanes like to have predetermined marks on how high they're going to go to sign a free agent. We know that that's the way they like to work. So if they draw a line in the sand, say they're not going past this much to sign a player, it usually means they're not going to go past that line to sign a player. We know that they bended a little bit with the Andrei Svechnikov deal. They may have to bend a little bit with the Sebastian Aho extension if they do try and extend him. But it sounds like Brett Pesce may be one of the guys that they may not be willing to bend a little bit. And if they're not able to get a contract extension at some point in the offseason with Pesce on a longer term extension to keep him in Carolina, I've seen some reports say it's possible that Pesce could be a trade chip for the Hurricanes. Pesce is a really good top 4 defenseman. He's a top 4 right shot defenseman, mostly playing with Brady Shea over the past couple of years on the second line. He's a really good defensive defenseman, not someone who will put up a ton of points, but he's a really, really good defensive defenseman, can really work well with like a offensive player, and he's entering the final year of his deal at just over $4 million. So if the Carolina Hurricanes aren't able to extend him, I could see him probably get like $6 million, maybe even $7 million on the open market. So if the Hurricanes aren't able to extend him, would they be willing to trade him? I think it's possible. I'm not going to say it's a guarantee because that's a little bit of a stretch, but I do think it's possible that we could see a Pesce trade. A team who's looking for a top 4 defenseman, who looks like a Stanley Cup contender, who looks like they're missing just one piece from that puzzle, I think could definitely be looking at a guy like Brett Pesce and trying to bring him in. A team who maybe has a little bit more of an offensive defenseman, but could be looking for like a defensive defenseman to pair with him. I could see them have a ton of interest in Pesce. So I do still think that the Hurricanes will try and sign Pesce, and maybe they do come to terms on an extension. But it just sounds like if the Hurricanes and Pesce can't come to an extension at some point in the offseason, it's a possibility, not a guarantee, but a possibility that Pesce could be a trade chip for the Hurricanes going forward. So definitely an interesting situation to see. Love to hear what you think down in the comments. If the Carolina Hurricanes can't get an extension on with Pesce, does he get traded? And if so, what would be the best fit for him across the NHL? Definitely let me know what you think down in the comments. Next was Jonathan Toews. Could he stay in the Central Division? Now, we don't know exactly what the future holds for Jonathan Toews. We know he will not be back with the Chicago Blackhawks. There was some talk earlier that he could retire, but then there was also some talk that he still wants to play, and as long as his health is okay, he would love to play another season or two. So I don't think it's too surprising if Toews plays another year or two, maybe 3. So what I was wondering is, could Toews remain in the Central Division? Now, he's not going to go to Chicago, and there's not very many teams in there that need some center help, but there's a couple. Teams like, in my opinion, the Minnesota Wild, Winnipeg Jets, and the Colorado Avalanche are all teams who could, I think, be seeking a top 6 center this offseason. Now, we know that the Avalanche missed Kadri this past year. We're not able to replace him at the second-line center position, and they're still most likely going to try and find a second-line center this year. Could Toews be an option as like the second-line center behind McKinnon? The Jets, we know that they're going to try and move Dubois. They might be forced also to move Scheifele. That's their top 2 centers. I'm not sure if they are going to be able to acquire a top 6 center in a trade for those two. So they may be needing a top 6 center anyway. And if they're going to try and remain decent next year, could they try and sign Toews? That Toews has connections to Manitoba. So could he go to Winnipeg? I think that's another possibility. And we know for a fact that the Minnesota Wild have been looking for a top-line center who can play top-line minutes with guys like Kaprizov and Zuccarello. They've been looking for someone who can help them, but who's not too expensive, as they're still in a pretty bad cap situation. So could they go after Jonathan Toews? I think that's another possibility. Toews, if they can get him for somewhere between like $2.5 and $3.5 million for like a year or two, I think that would be a perfect fit for Toews in Minnesota. So definitely, I'm not exactly sure if Toews will sign a new contract with a new team or if he'll retire. But if he does try and sign a new contract with someone, I could see guys like Colorado, who needs a second-line center behind McKinnon, Winnipeg, who could have a need for a top-6 center if they move Scheifele and Dubois, and Minnesota, who's been looking for a top-6 center to play with Kaprizov and Zuccarello over the past couple of years, all be good options for Toews. And I think it's at least possible that Toews could remain in the Central Division for next year. So definitely going to be interesting to see. Love to hear what you think down in the comments. Does Toews keep playing with his NHL career? And if so, could one of these 3 teams be a solid option for him going forward? And lastly, here with the San Jose Sharks. Now, we talked over the past week about the Kings and the Ducks, how the Kings were looking to move Peterson, Walker, it sounded like Iafallo as well. We talked about the Ducks and how they could move guys like Henrique, Comtois, and Gibson. So I figured, why not complete the California road trip and see who's some of the options for the San Jose Sharks to be moving this offseason. So, as we talked about a while, Erik Karlsson's probably the biggest name to watch out for in San Jose. 5 years left, $11.5 million, not an easy contract to move. But I think following that great season he's had this past year in San Jose, where he hit 100 points, there's definitely going to be some teams interested. And if the San Jose Sharks can retain enough salary that makes it worthwhile for the other team, I think Carlson could be a trade chip this offseason. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be a very complicated trade. But I think there's a way for the San Jose Sharks to get out of most of Erik Karlsson's contract this offseason. So definitely going to be interesting to see. But I think Carlson is the most likely trade tip for the Sharks. There's a couple of other guys here too on the forward group. You're looking at Kevin Labanc and Alex Barabanov. Both are pretty good young forwards, both really good in the middle 6. Labanc's sort of fallen off over the past couple of years, but had a solid season last year. Barabanov's definitely emerged as a really good second-line winger over the past couple of years. Labanc's making just over $4 million. Barabanov's making $2.5 million, so there's a possibility that the Sharks could retain someone Labanc, but I think those two are really good middle 6 forwards. They're not too old. And I think if the Sharks were willing to move them, there would definitely be some teams interested. Both guys are entering the final year of their deals, so they're not long-term commitments. And both guys can definitely produce really well in the middle six role. So keep your eye on LeBanc and Barabanov as possible trade options. Another guy would be Mario Ferraro, a little bit less likely, but Ferraro has a couple of years left at just over $3 million cap hit. Is a really good top four defenseman. I think he could definitely improve a team's top four somewhere else. He's good, and he's a younger defenseman, so the Sharks may be more inclined to keep him. But still, I think there's a good enough trade package there. Ferraro could be another guy who's moved. Vlasic, who has a couple years left at $6 million cap hit, I think he'd be more of a buyout candidate, even though that wouldn't really save San Jose a whole lot of money. But still, whether it be buyout or whether they find a team who would be willing to take him on for the next couple of years, Vlasic is another guy who I think could be traded just due to the fact that he has a pretty high cap hit. And then on top of those guys, maybe they consider moving a guy like goalie Kaapo Kähkönen. Kähkönen will be entering the final year of his deal. He's going to be UFA next offseason. I don't think they want to lose him for nothing. So if the Sharks are able to get maybe another goalie via free agency or something, maybe are able to improve that goaltending a bit, maybe they try and give Kähkönen away to another team. I think Kähkönen is a really good goalie, but I also think that he could definitely improve another team's duo in net. So wouldn't be too shocked if he was another trade option for the Sharks. But definitely, those are some guys to keep your eyes on. LeBanc, Ferraro, Vlasic maybe, Carlson, Barabanov, Kähkönen are all possible trade options in my opinion for the San Jose Sharks. And the Sharks, just like the Ducks and possibly the Kings, are going to be an interesting team to watch over the next few weeks leading up to their draft and free agency. But that's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video and subscribe. We're on a road to 100 subscribers, so definitely if you like this video, hit the subscribe button down below. Also remember to keep up to date on my channel. Like I said, I'll be doing a couple more videos most likely over the next couple of weeks discussing trades and significant signings on top of my 3 videos I do every week. Plus, don't forget to tune in on June 28th at 4 o'clock for my live draft video. So definitely keep up to date on those 2 things. I also have a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, off-season previews, stuff like that. So definitely check that out. I'll leave a link to that in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.